Hello and welcome to Masters of PR Live. After a long break, we are back again, and we are not just back. We are back with a guest who has done it all in the world of PR across multiple countries, industries, and roles. So today we have with us Ketaki Golatkar, a communications powerhouse with over 20 years of experience spanning India, Germany, UK, and the UAE. From leading global PR for the International Cricket Council, that's ICC, to now running her own consultancy, Good Day PR and Strategic Communications Global. Ketki has shaped brand narratives across sports, media, entertainment, and corporate communications. Her journey is a fascinating mix of reinvention, resilience, and leadership. From agency life to corporate PR, from Germany's academic world to global sports marketing, and now as an entrepreneur, building a purpose-driven agency. It's like Ketki is like a Wonder Woman to me. Ketki, welcome to Masters of PR Live. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Vikram. You're very, very generous and very, very kind. But above all of this, we are friends before, colleagues and
Yes.
everything else. But thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great, Ketki. So we'll just dive in. So they say PR isn't something you stumble upon, it finds you. How did you get into PR? Was this always a plan or did it happen by chance?
Well, a lot of things in my life happened by chance, but PR actually wasn't one of them. I was very young. So I've been a dancer all of my life. I started dancing when I was about 3 or 4 years old and trained in classical dance. So storytelling came very naturally to me. But my mother is a psychotherapist and my dad's a mechanical engineer. Now, we all know that our generation of children have been sort of bred to either become engineers or doctors. So,
Yeah.
my parents, my father wanted me to be an engineer. He's a mechanical engineer. But my mother is a psychotherapist, so she used to do a lot of aptitude tests at the time growing up to see whether we had the aptitude and the attitude to actually do or pursue any profession. So during my aptitude test, I actually could have been an engineer, is what they said. But my mother was keen on me taking psychology, and I stumbled upon, the course, bachelor's course in mass media, which was very
Mm.
new from the Mumbai University at the time. In fact, ours was one of the first batches of that course. And we had a subject called PR at the time. I specialized in advertising. And like everybody's dream was to work with an agency called Ogilvy. I joined
Mm.
them. While I was in Ogilvy PR, I got exposed to the different elements of marketing communications very quickly because we used to work on, at the time, 360-degree campaigns that involved PR, digital marketing, rural marketing was a big thing at the time as well, and of course the above the line mainstream advertising. Um, and but something just told me that because I was not really very convinced with the blatant selling of the advertising world, I wanted to actually use my psychology background because of
Hmm.
my mother and the conversations at dinner table and use that in the art of persuasion. And of course we studied PR at university, and I decided to go to XIC to pursue a post graduation in PR and communications. So that's how I decided to very, very targetedly pursue a profession in PR. And at those days, XIC's classes used to be in the evening. So I had the time in the day, and we had the opportunity to do internships and begin our careers as well while pursuing post graduation. So I began, in a boutique agency called Integral PR at the time in the day, which was in Nariman Point, and in the
Yeah,
evenings I used to
I
go
remember.
to
Yep.
XIC, St. Xavier's. So, and by the time I was home, I was dead tired and hungry. So that was my journey in PR began with that.
Very interesting. So every experience shapes your story, and yours took an interesting turn in Germany. You became a lecturer from PR. Yet you found your way back into PR. How did that happen, and what did you take away from that phase of yours?
So, well, like I said in the beginning, a lot of things happened to me by chance. So, Germany was also by chance. It was because I met my then husband and I got married and I moved there. And I got married in 2008, and everybody knows that year was so important for
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of us as well in communications,
Yeah.
because it was the beginning of the global financial crisis.
Yes.
So I was at Ad Factors at the time when I got married. My first stint at Ad Factors. I had just come back from the UK. And what happened was I had this, because my experience in the UK was very different and distinct. I also set up a PR function of an advertising agency there while I was staying there and working. I thought, I assumed that Germany would be the same. And it was very naive of me to think that, yes, I'll learn
Hmm.
the language as an adult, but I'll get a job in PR. How difficult would it be, right? But little do you realize that, it's one thing to speak a new language or a foreign language, but it's totally a different ball game when you have to be creative in that language. And we all know our
Yeah.
profession requires that kind of creativity and also a cultural nuance to our communication, right? While I can,
Yes.
communicate. So what do you do in a market that is not open to somebody who doesn't speak that language creatively? So I, of course, learned the language after we got married, and the option was to teach. So I was teaching business English at the University of Hohenheim in Stuttgart for a very brief period, and also teaching dance. So I fell back on my dance, because what do you do when there are no jobs? And that's, I mean, we are going to talk about the many lessons of life that I've picked up, but one of them is actually having something outside of our professional life that actually we can fall back on as well, whether it's a hobby
Great.
or anything, that sort of helps us keep ourselves sane as well. So that's basically that little teaching pivot that I made, which was also by accident. It wasn't a choice, but to stay relevant while I was, learning the German language and trying to find my way into the German PR industry. That was the pivot that I took.
Very interesting. So coming back home is always a mix of excitement and uncertainty. So when you moved back to India, what was on your mind? What were you hoping to achieve? And did those things pan out the way you expected?
Well, I came back to India to lead a communications project, a diplomatic communications project for the German
Hmm.
government at the time. So I came back with a very focus on, clear focus on running that project in India. I was based out of Delhi, working very closely with the embassy. But unfortunately, during that time, our marriage fell apart. And that sort of put me again in a situation where I had to pivot my life. So while I finished the project, and it was a very successful project, it was where I made a lot of connections within the Indo German world as well. And I had to then decide to come back home. Home was Bombay, always Bombay, because that's where my parents are. And that meant that sort of adjusting to that life back home and getting back into the PR industry. So what better place than the agency world to get back into that network and reestablishing yourself? And I was fortunate that I got the opportunity with Edelman at the time. I did a year with them. I was leading their corporate practice, and fantastic people, fantastic work. And then At Factors kept calling again. So that's where we met, and we did some fabulous work together as well. So
Actually met in 2008 as well. So even in 2008 to 10, I was in Affectus. So we had met then as
of course, but
well.
you were not in Shalaka at the time, were you?
No, I was not in Sri Lanka. I was in Rajma.
Yes, yes.
Right. Uh, so, you know, handling PR for sports events like ICC World Cup means managing a lot of high expectations, massive audiences, and a very unpredictable challenges that would come your way. What are the unique challenges of managing PR at such a global scale? What did you face that you can still narrate and it's there on top of your mind?
See, Fortunately for me, I had that global exposure because of my stints abroad before I took on ICC. Even the story of me landing that job was quite funny because I thought it was actually a joke. Somebody DM'd me from ICC and presented the job description, and I thought it was really a joke. Why would they reach out? But I was already at Star Sports at the time, and Star Sports was actually really my launch pad, if you will, in the business of sports marketing and broadcast and communication. It was a completely different beast. Nothing that I had ever done and ever prepared me for something like that. 24 by 7 sports all around me. And I was actually hired to run PR for Kabaddi, largely. Like
Hmm.
my boss at the time had mentioned that 80% of my time will be Kabaddi and 20% will be
You ever
cricket.
played kabaddi?
Yes, I mean much later, as you know, just literally after the live event, we'll just play around on the mat or something like that.
What,
But
what about cricket?
never
Were you
ever
amazing, amazing, and
in
you
a
managed
sari, mind
ICC,
you,
and you
in a
managed
sari,
ICC,
mind
right?
you. No,
So
so
great. Yeah.
cricket, I have always been a sports fan. You know, that's the thing that
Mm,
people don't understand. I grew up around sport all of my life. So my parents were avid sports fan. My father was
mm,
cricket mad. My
mm.
mother has been a tennis crazy person all of her life. So our July to December calendar was completely filled with watching sports on television. And my brother is also a football player, by the way. So it's very surprising for people to understand that I look the way I do. I wear a sari, and I'm also an artist at heart, but I do,
Yeah.
consume a lot of sport. So it was quite natural for me to get into it, but I have never worked in sport at the time. And Star Sports was really where I learned the ropes of sports marketing and communications. So ICC was then literally multiplying. We have about 108 members, which means 108 countries that play cricket at different levels. And of course, we have full members that basically are the test playing countries, which
Mhm.
form the board, and they actually run and make decisions around cricket, while the ICC management creates structures and programs that allow cricket to sort of flourish across markets. So there's
Well,
there
we have a
is an
question.
element. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. You're
No,
saying
so coming
there's an
back,
element.
your question was about the crisis and the
Challenges that you faced. Like, was there a
challenges
glass ceiling that
around.
you had to encounter?
Well, I became the first Indian woman and the first brown woman on the roll as well, because
Mm.
before me, my predecessors were all men, and
Mhm.
yeah, it was quite something.
Right. We have a question from Kavita Desai. She's asking, having worked across industries and geographies, what are the biggest shifts you've seen in PR over the last 2 decades? How has digital media and influencer culture reshaped the way brands communicate?
Well, it's changing every day as we speak. And I always say this to anybody who asks me about the shift between global, how PR is, practiced globally versus in India. I feel like the training that all of us received when we started our careers a few decades ago was so important. Like when we started the writing, right?
Mm,
Every PR professional was expected to write. And that hasn't changed anywhere else in the world, despite the digital boom. And, what we had to what we had about 30 to 45 minutes to write a press release at the time, because we're now living in a digital first medium. We'll probably have to, flesh it out in 15 minutes. That's probably
yeah.
the difference, but we still have to write those releases, and we'll probably have chat gpt to edit it out for us. We still have to write that first draft ourselves. And yes, of course, there is this whole, I wouldn't use the word influencer. I'm a little averse to the word because we are working with creators, we're working with content creators. Real influencers are people who've actually made a big impact in society. And that term is used a little bit loosely as per me. But we do work with, we've always worked with advocates and KOLs, right? So if you're working for a pharma company, you'll have a doctor who's your KOL or a medical health professional who's a KOL. So it's basically the same formula. You just have to be aware of that particular circle of influence in that industry that you're operating in. And the groundwork that Indian PR industry offers is unparalleled. If you've started your career in PR in India, the sheer diversity and magnitude of our market, you know, the amount of publications in print, digital, hybrid publications as well, if you've mastered that market, I think you can work anywhere else in the world.
Mm,
And
agree.
that's something that we should really be proud of. That's also one thing we should really harness and nurture, and really get a lot of the young professionals to understand what the basics of that structure that we grew up with really is, and the strength of it. You know, writing, yes, we are also media relations, but your media relations will be only as good as the story you actually tell the journalist and convince them to actually carry it. So you have to be able to think before the journalist and understand what that story is, so to be able to tell it effectively.
Fully agree with you, Kirki. But coming back to sports PR again, in sports, a PR crisis can actually unfold in real time in front of millions. Cricket and sports broadcasting have seen their fair share of controversies in the recent past. How does PR help manage such crises, and what's the key to protecting a brand's reputation in these kind of situations?
Well, it's just like any other industry. You have to preempt the crisis before it happens. That's the basic rule of mitigating crisis, right? So when you have an event of that scale, what we generally do is have a very, very robust crisis communication and mitigation plan with what, you know, which involves the host countries. Say, for
Mm,
instance, now the example of the Champions Trophy happening here, divided
mm,
between two, countries, and part of it is in the UAE and part of it is Pakistan. What are the external threats that would jeopardize the successful running of that tournament? We all have to sort of
mm,
put our heads together and plan and think through what are the agencies, therefore, that will be involved in helping us mitigate that crisis, which includes governments of those countries, which includes security personnel of that country, which media is like a very tiny, minuscule, stakeholder in that universe. But as somebody who has led comms in that dynamic stakeholder universe, we'll have to think through. I remember there was a tournament that happened during COVID here, which was the
mm,
21 T20 World Cup in the UAE. We had to plan for sandstorms. Like,
mm.
weather is always something that isn't in anybody's control, right? So that's something that we had to plan for. I mean, sandstorm. And if you have a tournament in the UK and the beautiful English weather, you'll have to plan for rain and
Okay.
everything else. So you just have to prepare for the worst and ensure that you have plans in place to sort of mitigate that. And regarding the real time issues that crop up, say, for instance, there's an injury on the field, or there is a security breach, like a random fan has entered the field of play area, etc. There are protocols in place that we follow. Of course, it's a security breach, and our statements are generally ready to put out for press. But it's all prepared and planned and thought through in advance before something like this happens.
Agree. Transitioning from corporate PR to starting your own firm is quite a bold move. You moved to Dubai, worked on the client side, and then launched your own PR firm. What led to that decision, and how did you take that up? That big leap. I can call it a leap of faith, or you're confident. Just tell us, how did that happen?
I like to think, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, but I like to think that that is my midlife, uh, transition. I wouldn't call it a crisis, but transition, because, we all have been sort of confronted with this phase of life. Okay, I lost 2 years ago, I lost my father, unfortunately, very suddenly. And that made me realize many things and reprioritize my life. And I was also reaching that midlife stage where I was thinking about legacy planning and thinking about giving back and doing something that is truly mine. And combined with, of course, dealing with having the flexibility to choose the people I work with, the projects that I work on, and also have the time to spend with the family and the people that really matter to me. So that was really that drive, or rather that change in my life that made me want to start something on my own. And then again, we're all middle class people, right? Like we're always afraid of where the next paycheck is coming from. I'm actually literally the first generation entrepreneur in my entire family. Yeah, my uncle actually started a business, but yeah, first female entrepreneur, I would say. And it was scary. I had to make a lot of life changes, including living frugally. And yeah, I'm still learning. So here I am trying to figure it out at mid 40 and making the most of it.
Congratulations, and I'm sure you'll do it.
Thank you.
Moving forward, PR isn't one size fits all game. We all know that. Every market has its own nuances. Having worked across India, UK, Germany, and now in UAE, how does PR in India compare to these global markets? You spoke about if you worked here and you learned what is and how to do things in India, you can do it anywhere. But the biggest you know approach difference that you take it to another continent, because you've seen it in whole different countries or continents, I could say. So from one country to another, how do you change a complete approach? Basics of PR would remain the same, but there will be a lot that would change.
The basics of PR remain changed. Like you said, don't change. They remain the same. But the some of the application differs. Like for instance, Germany, of course, language is a big thing, culture is a big thing, and the media landscape is a big thing, right? So
Mm.
those are the only differences. The fact that we still have to write and to be able to comprehend complex information and simplify it for the layman on the street, that is still the very basic and core of what we do as professionals, right? It's just that whether I would approach, say, a Financial Times, or whether I would approach a Stuttgarter Zeitung, or I would approach a Khaleej Times or a Gulf News changes, and how I would write that pitch, or how I would sort of work with an influencer or a content creator, that would differ in different markets. But the basic principle of PR remains the same. We still need media relations. We still need content writing. We still need to be able to have the EQ, IQ, RQ, which is relationship quotient, to be able to do our jobs better, regardless of whether we have the help of AI or not. Basic intelligence is still required.
Yeah.
And common sense also is very much required. And the ability to read the room. A lot of us, in India, we are sometimes too afraid. And I can say this because I've been on the corporate communication end as well, too afraid to tell the CEO that he's wrong or she's wrong, or show them a better way of doing things. And I think that is one of the most underrated skills in our profession. That's the cultural nuance that in India is probably different from a different market. So, for instance, we would be a little less hesitant with a British CEO to say they would look at you for advice, and it would be easier to give it without any apprehension than we would do probably in India because of our culture and the hierarchies and organizations and the fact that you're a woman in the room sometimes, many factors. But those are little things that you pick up when you've lived outside of India for a bit, and knowing how to read the room, speaking truth to power, all of these are things that help us as professionals to do our jobs better. And
What
sometimes
about media?
when we
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry
Just too
sometimes when
curious.
we sometimes we are not able to do it ourselves, we get the agency guy to do it for us. So we probably get the CEO of the agencies to come and say the same thing that we're trying to tell the CEO, because sometimes the outsider perspective, the objective perspective is useful and helpful. So those little things are the things that you pick up when you work in different
Uh,
environments.
But what about media? Are they equally approachable? Because you would have a different experience in India. Is that very much different in Germany, UK, UAE? How approachable is media to, say, someone who is non-local?
Yes. Now, it doesn't matter if you're local or not. However, the media is slightly evolved in Western markets, I would say. They are a lot more open to collaboration. Also, there is a huge respect, mutual respect within the fraternity for PR people and between PR people and journalists. There's a lot of collaboration that happens, and that makes our job easier. I mean, they still do ask the difficult questions and do the job that they need to, especially the business press. But it's a lot, in my experience, it's a very, very symbiotic relationship, which we hadn't seen for a very long time in India, because there was always this, even within the journalist editor relationship with a PR person, there was always a huge gap that we had to sort of overcome as junior PR execs. Like we had to
Yeah,
earn the right to
yeah.
sit in the editor's
Yes.
office to have a cup of tea. Here, in the West, it's you have a story, you have something interesting to say. There's always an audience. It's easier to have that audience, and of course, the egos exist and they vary, but it's a lot easier to have that compelling conversation if you have something interesting to offer, of course.
Agree. Let's come back to Good Day PR. So many PR firms claim to do it all, but great firms know what they stand for. Tell us more about Good Day PR. What are your specializations? What do you don't do, and what sets you apart from other firms in your market there?
So the way I wanted to sort of design Good Day PR and found it was to sort of create something that helps our society in all possible ways. When I mean that, work with clients and within industries that help shape us in ways that other companies probably wouldn't. So when I say that, I mean focusing on industries that add value to society, whether it's health, health tech, education, sport, art, all of it. And it is also an agency formed to help people who look like me, sound like me, which is women of color. I live in the UAE, and a lot of these agencies here, global agencies that have MENA operations, are largely run by Western expats, European or American or Australian. and very few women in leadership as well. But then, if at all, then they are largely, you know, Western. And there was I mean, PR Week came up with a top 50 power list recently, and there was probably just two people in that list that were of South Asian descent.
Mm.
And South Asia, mind you, is the largest expat community in the whole of UAE. Literally, the country, Dubai included as a city and an emirate, was built by South Asians, hard labor, and some of the civil engineers that came way back, over 50 years ago. So it was a very stark vacuum of industry and agency talent that didn't exist within the South Asian community. And I thought I wanted to focus on that. So, South Asian businesses and also businesses run by women and women of color, because that
Mhm.
is very important. Every voice needs to be heard, and we need to give that sort of global exposure to those voices as well. And since my experience is global, I do a lot of projects that go outside of MENA as well. So any projects in India or in the UK or Germany, I take those up as well.
Interesting. We often celebrate success but rarely talk about failures, and yet failure is where we learn the most. Where do you think you failed, and what did
Oh
those
God.
experiences teach you?
I think I've failed in every decade of my life. I've had my heart broken terribly. I've made the wrong decisions, but I've never regretted anything. I think what is important is to be open. What I've learned from the many failures, and I'll talk about them as well. But what I've learned is that to allow yourself to fail. It's one thing that sports and art teaches you is that you were never going to have the same you know, type of success every single time. So you lose a match, you lose a game, and then you have to start all over again. You have a great performance, but the audience isn't applauding. It's not in your control. You have to start all over again. So and sometimes, you have a very, very average performance, and people are like, oh my God, that's amazing. So it's really strange how failure shapes you in many ways. And I've also learned over the years is that we need to redefine what success actually means for all of us. Every decade had taught me to redefine that success for myself. So, for instance, at 20, my ambition was to have a global career in PR. I did that, and then what next? Um 30 in my 30s, I wanted to have a global career in PR and also have a happy married life. I didn't have the second part of my goal. I mean, it was short lived, but we had our moments of happiness and everything, but it didn't work out. So that was one thing, right? So I had to then redefine what that decade success would mean for me, which meant going back home, spending time with my family, and rediscovering myself at in my 30s. So, and now in my 40s, I'm literally starting something from scratch. And you work with so many entrepreneurs yourself during your practice at Ad Factors, and the startup
Yeah.
space. There is everything has to be done. It's a do it yourself universe sometimes, when much before you get funded and you have the capacity to do other things, and just to be able to have that agility and resilience to keep going despite the rejections is the biggest lesson, I think, about. And also, I think we should just stop making failure sound like it's a bad thing.
Mm.
It's really something that is required for us to grow. So
Right.
that is what I think about failure anyway.
Great. We have one last question from Ishita Paintkar. Uh, so PR is a marathon. We all know that it's not a sprint. For young professionals like Ishita entering the industry today, what advice would you give them before they land up in the jobs?
Um, I think there is a lot that we speak about our industry, and there's a lot of pressure on a young, you know, workforce that is getting into the industry as well. But it's important for us to remember the basics. I know we talk about AI and PR and influencer marketing and content creation and all of it added to the basics of what we were taught when we started, right? So I would recommend that I know a lot of young people consume content in different places than we do. I would recommend that they continue to read and inform their opinions basis traditional media's outlook before they sort of consume content, say on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or anywhere else. That is one thing. Reading, 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 because reading enables us to write better, to think better. And that continues to be like the basics of PR, you know, eternally, I would think. So, also, I have a formula and also an advice for a lot of young people, and I use it for myself as well. Is this digital detox? Because we consume so much content as PR professionals because of the sheer nature of our work, right? We are like breaking stories everywhere, and there's just so much content that is literally coming to us involuntary as well, because as when we are traveling to our workplace in a cab, we are scrolling through Instagram and Twitter to see if there was anything that's going to impact our client, etc. So there has to be some time that we disconnect from the 24 by 7 news cycle just to keep ourselves sane and come back the next day think fresh as well. So those are the two things I think I would definitely recommend the young professionals, and also be very, I'm more amazed at the agency that young people, the Gen Z, you know, community has, that we didn't have. They are not afraid to ask questions. They're not afraid to speak up. And they also have, you know, a better bullshit radar, if I'm allowed to use that word here on uh, LinkedIn Live. But they do much better than we did when we were starting off. So I appreciate that a lot, and keep that. But also read enough to inform your opinions basis somebody else's thought, and
Yep.
try and read different perspectives from different media outlets and also books to be able to add that value to your clients and your teams.
Kirti, every guest who has come on the show has reiterated one thing that people have to read, read, read. And this has been a constant message across. You've also said the same thing. But Kirti, this has been such an insightful and inspiring conversation. Your journey from working across continent to handling PR at the highest level in sports and now building a firm with purpose, it's truly remarkable. I'm sure our audience has taken away so much from this discussion, from navigating career shifts to managing crisis communications and building a brand that stands for something meaningful. To everyone watching, thank you for joining us today on Masters of PR Live. If you found this conversation valuable, do share, like, and comment with your biggest takeaway. We'll come back to you next Tuesday, 7:30 p.m., with another exciting guest. Till then, keep telling great stories and shaping reputations. Thank you so much. Thank you all, and thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Enjoyed this very much.
Same here.